vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fishmas, Mr. Axo Bucket. Anyone? Is anyone here with Goat vs. Fish? We think there is. We think there is. We think there is. We think there might be a versus. It has been at least a billion verses since you have been here, but you are always welcome. Greetings, Psychic Buckeye 12. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. From your snowy places, yes, from your snowy places. Do not despair, Goat vs. Fish is here. Goat vs. Fish is here! Celebration! Celebration! Psychic Buckeye 12 with 14 months of Goat vs. Fish appreciation. Wasted Height celebration for Goat. Bot Colton, bah! Bah! Goat and Fish, how are? We think it should be versus. The musication levels and the sound of the talking of Goat vs. Fish. To find verses, fair verses, an acceptable verses, more musications, less musications. Goat, 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 parapluie celebration for Goat. Appreciation, Mr. Axo Bucket, appreciation. We'll solve that verses. How's that for Goat vs. Fish? How's that for a Goat vs. Fish? How's that for a Goat vs. Fish? It should be slightly more verses now. It should be slightly more Goat vs. Fish now. Slightly more Goat vs. Fish. Celebration! Celebration! Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. We're going to get started on the verses. We're just doing some final preparations. Some final preparations of Goat vs. Fish. Yes. Let's start the verses. We are listening to the musications of the Pandemonium Big Band, which you can find on Places. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish! Welcome to Goat vs. Fish! Goat vs. Fish is very epic, and Goat vs. Fish is here to spread some Goat vs. Fishmas cheer. Are you here to spread some Goat vs. Fishmas cheer? Celebration! 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 Celebration for Goat vs. Fish. There are many mountains, top lane 2, iron 5. Many mountains of Goat vs. Fish. Many mountains of Goat vs. Fish. Shamar George, are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? What is that goat, bro? Get rid of it, please. Not saying you should get another one, though, but still. Are you goat or are you fish? Box Shorts, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Not saying you should get another one, but I am saying you should get another one. Well, do you take offense? Do you take offense? Not, are you saying we should take offense?
Do you have a problem with this goat? Why do you have a problem with me? I have done nothing to you but give you ultimate freedom.
You see, the goat says it has given you ultimate freedom. The goat says it gave you ultimate freedom. What more could you say about this goat? No, but it looks devilish. Oh no, oh no. Jammed tomb, celebration for fish. Yeah, you friggin' tell this guy. Walk shorts, you friggin' tell this guy. Yeah, I don't want to have that friggin' devil running around my friggin' birthday stream, you know? I'm getting very suspicious. You know, I've never actually seen the word friggin' Merry Christmas on a friggin' Goat vs. Fish stream before in my friggin' life. So, I'm getting a little bit friggin' concerned that something's about to happen that's, you know, a little bit untoward. You know what I'm friggin' saying? But, you know, we're gonna see. Maybe Goat vs. Fish is getting the friggin' Christmas spirit, you know? Walk Shorts has declared fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Fish, 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 fish. Fish, 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 fish. Jammed tomb. When it comes around Versmas time, Goat vs. Fishmas time, Jesus is always coming about and complaining, oh, it's my birthday. We should be celebrating my birthday. Why don't we celebrating my birthday? Meh. This is already an amazing versus. It is a very amazing versus. Goat vs. Fish. Join the Patreon of Goat vs. Fish. Your birthday is in 10 versus celebration. Psychic Buckeye 12 celebration. Goat vs. Fish. Versmas is coming. Goat vs. Fishmas is coming soon. I subscribe to Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish should be a rivalry. It is a rivalry. It's a rivalry between goat and fish. Goat vs. Fish. Appreciation for 1 bit. Appreciation for 1 bit. Waste of space. If you join the Patreon of Goat vs. Fish for 5 versus American dollars a month, for 5 versus American dollars a month, you too. You too can get a Versmas card from Goat vs. Fish. So we found these verses that say Mary. What does that say? Mary Ehistmas. Mary Ehist. Mary. It says friggin' Christmas, you dumbass. It says Merry Christmas. And if you don't friggin' know, the Christ is for friggin' Christ. And that's for friggin' me. Christ, your friggin' savior. Christ, your friggin' savior is friggin' born over here. I did friggin' die because you are such a friggin', well, let's just put it out there, you know, you're a friggin' degenerate, Goat vs. Fish, and I had to friggin' die and friggin' come back from the dead just so you could get into the friggin' kingdom of heaven, you know? Well, we got all kinds of all the friggin' fruit cakes and pies and friggin' naked ladies that you could ever friggin' want. Whatever the best thing that you think that there is, we friggin' got it. And it's even better than that. Your imagination is very poor. And you get to spend all your friggin' time with me and my friggin' dad. And, you know, if you don't friggin' want to take me up on that friggin' offer, you know, I got another friggin' place. I got another friggin' place you can go. Don't friggin' test me, Goatfish man. So yeah, this is about Christ. It's about friggin' Christ. It's about me. It's about my friggin' birthday over here. Yeah, yeah, yeah! Oh, Goat versus Fish. Oh, Goat versus Fish. We just don't know. It sounds like that Christmas is a flagrant imitation of Goat versus Fishmas. It seems to Goat versus Fish, Christmas is just a false imitation of Goat versus Fishmas. Because we all know that in the beginning there was Goat versus Fish, and Goat versus Fish said that there should be goat and that there should be fish. No. In the beginning, God created the friggin' what came first? Was it the Earth or was it the friggin' space? Look, in the friggin' beginning, my dad was there. My dad was there in the beginning, not friggin' you. It wasn't you, Goldfish guy. In the beginning, it was my dad. And well, what was before that versus? What was before your dad? Man, I just told you it's the friggin' beginning of everything. Well, before Goat versus Fish, it was, yeah, what was friggin' before Goat versus Fish? A friggin' less of a friggin' migraine-splitting headache I got friggin' right now? Before Goat versus Fish, it was Goat versus Fish. It was always Goat versus Fish. It was always Goat versus Fish. And in the beginning, there was Goat versus Fish. I can't believe I'm being part of this friggin' blasphemy. That's not the kind of talk that's gonna get you into my friggin' private strip club. I mean, friggin' heaven. I roundly friggin' denounce you. Merry Goat versus Fishmas. 'Tis the verses of Goat versus Fishness. And Goat versus Fishmas. Welcome, Thunder Tracks, to Goat versus Fish. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. You know, I think it's more like a friggin' Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force and like a bit of like a 10% of like a friggin' Tony Soprano in there. But you know, if you want to say friggin' Bernie Sanders or whatever, you know, that guy's friggin' Jewish though. I mean, so am I, but you know, I kind of friggin' transcended that label with my whole friggin' Christ thing I got going on. Celebration for Goat, Thunder Tracks Goat, Thunder Tracks Goat. So we have to tidy up these verses. Some will be receiving these Merry Goat vs. Fishmas cards from Goat vs. Fish. If you would like to receive one of these cards, join the Patreon of Goat vs. Fish for $5 versus American dollars, $5 versus American dollars a month, and we will send you one of these. We will send you a Goat vs. Fishmas card. Join the Patreon. Join the Patreon to receive a card of Goat vs. Fish. But there's something false about these verses. There's something false about these verses. It seems that someone has taken Merry Goat vs. Fishmas cards and has crossed them out and replaced them with Christmas cards. How dare they replace Goat vs. Fishmas with Christ? How dare they? How dare they? How dare they? Jen Knight, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Says, I don't want to have to join the patriarchy to support fish. Well, is the patriarchy goat or is it fish? How about you just join Goat vs. Fish, Jen Knight? Abandon false verses, abandon false verses. So here we have Goat vs. Fish, celebration, celebration, celebration for Goat vs. Fish. Hey, what are you friggin' doing? What are you friggin' doing? No, that's my friggin' name. How dare you? How dare you? That's friggin' sacrilege. That's friggin' blasphemy. My dad is gonna have your friggin' head. Goatfish guy. That is very friggin' offensive. How could you friggin' take Christ's holy friggin' name and just put GoatVsFish on friggin' top of it? How dare you? How dare you friggin' do that? How dare you? I've never been so friggin' insulted in my friggin' life. I've never been so friggin' insulted in my life. Do I friggin' go around stealing other holidays and putting my name on top of it? Do I go around and start taking other friggin' winter holidays from around the friggin' world and just adopting all of their friggin' cultural iconography and just putting my name on top of it and saying that it was my holiday all along? I never friggin' did that. I never friggin' did that. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you just put your friggin' GoatVsFish on top of my Christmas and friggin' call it your own? I would never do that, and you are a friggin', I'm calling you a friggin' hypocrite. Hello. Well, that's one versus. That's one versus of Merry GoatVsFishmas celebration. That's one versus. But there are many more to go, Goat and Fish. There are many more to go. Go fish, Crocker, go fish. Emily Schulz, welcome to GoatVsFish. Celebration for fish. Crocker came from the ocean, says go fish. Go fish! Do you have any fish? Go fish. Isn't that a nice verses? And what shall be written inside? What shall be written inside? Who is to say what shall be written inside? Oh, it could be any verses. Thundertrack's goat.
Welcome to Goat. Welcome to Goat. Welcome to Goat Thundertracks. We are so pleased to have you in Goat.
Brando Creative, welcome. Welcome to GoatVsFish. Yes, goat damn it, Thundertracks. Goat damn it indeed. Merry GoatVsFishmas. Merry GoatVsFishmas. This is how we get into the GoatVsFishmas spirit, Goat and Fish. This is how we get into the GoatVsFishmas verses. GoatVsFish wanted to be here with all of you. celebrate Goat vs. Fishmas to get into the Goat vs. Fishmas verses. Goat vs. Fish is building a temple to Goat vs. Fish, a congregation of Goat vs. Fish, the first congregation of Goat vs. Fish. And we do not know if it will be preparation in time for Goat vs. Fishmas, but we thought the verses has come to send merry Goat vs. Fishmas cards to all the goat and fish. To all the goat and fish. Celebration. 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 Oh, they reversed the verses. They reversed the verses. Celebration, Parapluie, celebration. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Celebration. Celebration. A Goat vs. Fishmas card will be the best verses a goat could ever get, yes. If you want to get onto the Goat vs. Fishmas card mailing list, then just become a patron of Goat vs. Fish. Go to patreon.com/GoatVsFish, and for $5 American dollars a month, you too can receive Goat vs. Fishmas card from Goat vs. Fish. Join the Patreon of Goat vs. Fish! Exclamation Patreon in the chat of Goat vs. Fish, if you wish. Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish finds that, oh, we were about to say that you can either peel from the tail of the fish or from the hoof of the goat. This is the first verses that Goat vs. Fish will have done the Goat vs. Fishmas mailing list, but we think that we'll continue it in future verses. Everyone loves a nice Goat vs. Fishmas mailing. It makes you feel special. Special from Goat vs. Fish. You are all very special to Goat vs. Fish. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Adam S. Proudfish. Celebration for fish, celebration for fish, celebration for fish. Oh, my verses. We're out of Merry GoatVsFishmas cards. So many Merry GoatVsFishmas cards go to fish. But wait! How are we going to continue the GoatVsFishmas stream if we already have all the cards that say Merry GoatVsFishmas? Do not fear and do not fret. This will be a GoatVsFishmas we'll never forget. On GoatVsFishmas, we thank the power of consumerism and mass industry, because we have so many more of the exact same mass-produced kind of holiday card for you to use. GoatVsFish, we've got them all. And if you bought one, then you got the second one for 50% off. So that was kind of nice. We have more, we have more, we have more from the store. Celebration for stonks. Tis the verses, tis the verses. Tis the verses and tis the versmas.
I am filled entirely with hate. I do not feel love. I feel only hate.
Ooh, isn't that a nice goat?
Stop it. Stop.
Okay, goat. Okay, goat. Oh, don't start with that crap. Don't start with that crap. Fish is the only friggin' path to salvation. Look, I know I had a friggin' miracle with fish, all right? But look, that doesn't make me no friggin' fish. That does not make me a friggin' fish, Adam S. Salvation, the only way to salvation is through me directly. So, you better friggin' get down on your friggin' knees and kiss my friggin' feet. I've been wandering in the desert for quite some friggin' time. I'm not gonna say it'll be a friggin' pleasant experience for you. But it'll be better than the eternal friggin' damnation you got waiting for you on the other end of your ass if you friggin' don't, you know what I mean? Jesus fishing Christ. PNG Chris, welcome to GoatVsFish. That's what I friggin' like to hear, Adam S. You say I would do anything for him. Yeah, that's right. You would do friggin' anything for me. You know? It's like the time that my dad told that one friggin' guy to murder his own friggin' kid. You know? It's like a friggin' classic. You know? I thought that was a really friggin' good one. You know, you'd friggin' do anything. You friggin' do. Hey, you Adam S. You don't know what my friggin' accent. This is a friggin' authentic Bethlehem friggin' accent. From back then. You don't know what you weren't friggin' there. I'm a friggin' Nazarene, and that's my friggin' Nazarene accent, so friggin', whatever. That's the friggin' old, why are you even wasting your time friggin' remembering all that old friggin' stuff? I'm the new guy in friggin' town. New friggin' rules, new boss, new friggin' deal. Yeah, why did he nearly friggin' slay his son? I think it's because my friggin' dad told him to. So, you know, you just be ready. I might friggin' tell you to do something one of these friggin' days. You know, you say you do anything for me, you know. How about you kiss my ass and stop being such a friggin' sycophant, you know? Maybe grow a friggin' spine? Goat vs. Fish will not have you speaking to the goat and fish in the chat of Goat vs. Fish like that. That's very rude. Are you goat or are you fish? Please, goat and fish, please excuse the fancy and offensive behavior of Jesus. Jesus Christ, are you goat or are you fish? 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 Oh, but Emily Shells, there is no good or evil. There's only goat and fish. There is no good or evil. There is only goat and fish. Goat versus fish. Merry goat versus fish. Wow, Mom, with 48 months to Goat versus Fish, a tier 2 versus. A Merry Versemas to all. Wow, Mom, 48 months of Goat versus Fish. Celebration. 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 Wow, Mom, celebration. Goat versus Fish. We must go and empower the earbuds of Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish shall return. But we are still here. We are still going to speak to you, Goat and Fish. We are still speaking to you, Goat and Fish. And we're back in the verses. Are you goat or fish? Well, Mom, appreciation for 4 million years of Goat versus Fish. 4 million years of Goat versus Fish. 4 million years of 2-tier subscription. Merry Fishmas. Merry Goat versus Fishmas. Imagine it. Imagine it. Marcion of Sinope. Merry Goat versus Fishmas. So in previous verses, it has been Versemas. It has been Versemas, but Goat versus Fish. There's a new declaration of Goat versus Fish. Well, Versemas is still a nice abbreviation. Well, Versemas is an abbreviation. The declaration of Goat versus Fish is this. Versemas is now an abbreviation. Abbreviation, abbreviation. Versemas, the true verses of Versemas, shall be known as Goat versus Fishmas. Goat versus Fishmas. Goat versus Fishmas shall be the true verses of Versemas, because we really just think that we have to get Christ out of here and replace it with Goat versus Fish. It should really just be Goat versus Fish. So it's Goat versus Fishmas. We need to bring it back to Goat versus Fishmas because it was Goat versus Fishmas, and then Jesus Christ over here replaced Goat versus Fishmas with their own name because they are so envious of Goat versus Fish, and so now we have to change all of them back to Goat versus Fishmas. But it's okay. Celebration for LSD OCD Goat. So envious indeed. Oh, by the way, Adam S., you say you'll be waiting for my friggin' request. Well, I friggin' got one for you. I got one for you right here. And my friggin' request is that you go to patreon.com/GoatVsFish and that you become a friggin' paid patron of Goat vs. Fish for at least $5 friggin' a month. That is my friggin' request. And now you may say, you may quit, you may say, hey, that doesn't sound like something Action Figure Jesus would say. That sounds like something Goat vs. Fish would say. I thought that Jesus had beef with friggin' Goatfish guy. Why would Jesus be telling me to go and give money to friggin' Goat vs. Fish? Don't friggin' question my ways. I work in friggin' mysterious ways. You gotta trust friggin' God's plan. And my plan right now is for you to go to patreon.com/GoatVsFish and to subscribe for $5 friggin' a month and get you one of these friggin' cards. And once you get that friggin' card, then you peel the Goat vs. Fish sticker off to reveal my friggin' name. You see what I did there? You see what I did there? In my friggin' name, I want you to friggin' become a $5 patron to Goat vs. Fish so you can get one of these friggin' holiday cards and so you can take the friggin' Goat vs. Fish sticker off and replace my name and my friggin' glory. Zacadelic, shut up with that friggin' question. I'm asking the friggin' questions around here. It's easier for the camel to friggin' pass through your ass than it is for me to entertain that friggin' dumb question. Celebration for Bruce Willis Fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. No, I'm not friggin' drunk. I'm not friggin' drunk. I had maybe just well, you know the friggin' fun thing is, if I ever want to get drunk, I can just turn all the friggin' water in my friggin' body into wine. I can just be friggin' 80% friggin' wine. Pretty friggin' great. Like if I ever get friggin' bored of this Goat vs. Fish stream, I can just turn myself friggin' drunk, and it'll help the friggin' time go by. You know what I'm friggin' saying? What time to friggin' watch all of this shit? Merry Goat vs. Fishmas! Celebration! Merry Goat vs. Fishmas! Brew Lawrence, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Work in 1984, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Easter was also based on a Goat vs. Fish. Easter and Christmas were both based on celebrations of Goat vs. Fish. We're bringing the Goat vs. Fish back. Goat vs. Fishmas. Well, that is because work in 1984, you have been propagandization by the fence stream media. Propagandization. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas! Merry Goat vs. Fishmas! Bruce Willis Fish, Celebration for Fish. Isn't that a handsome verse? Isn't that a beautiful verse? Oh, what beautiful verses of Goat vs. Fish. Celebration. Bailed in with a subscription to Goat vs. Fish. Victory for fish, victory for fish. 21 months of fish, 21 months of fish. Fish, 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 fish. 21 months of fish. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Oh, they reversed the verses again. They reversed the verses again. That's right, we friggin' turned it upside down. We turned it upside down so you wouldn't know what to confound you, Goat vs. Fish. Behold my friggin' trickery and deception. That's right, I can friggin' do that. See, when I do it, it's called a friggin' miracle. But when Satan does it, it's a friggin' deception. Just friggin' know that. It's a friggin' unnatural. Appreciation, Goat. Appreciation for helping Goat vs. Fish. It's a nice verses for Goat. You friggin' stay out of this. You friggin' Satan. You friggin' back with thee. I friggin' cast you out. And a friend of the devil ain't no friggin' friend of mine. Yeah, you stay. You mind your friggin' business. It's between me and the goatfish guy. We don't know, Jesus. It's looking like it might be Goat vs. Fish. Are you certain that you're not fish, Jesus? You could be fish, and Satan could be goat. Could be a classic verses of Goat vs. Fish. Get into the Goat vs. Fishmas verses. Get into the verses of Goat vs. Fishmas, Jesus. And just be fish, and Satan can be goat, and it can totally be Goat vs. Fishmas. Unification for all goat and fish. Unification for all goat and fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish is versing around. Well, you'd better choose goat. Better choose fish. You better not go and sit on the fence. Goat vs. Fish is versing around. Goat vs. Fish. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Have you been a goat or a fish this verses? We're going to bring you all the celebrations. Just don't sit on the Versmas fence. The jolly old goatfish. What a jolly old goatfish. Kaya said Goat vs. Fish is their favorite person in the world. Celebration! I am Goat vs. Fish. I am Goat vs. Fish. And you know what, Kaya? Goat vs. Fish comes from within you. So if you say that Goat vs. Fish is your favorite person in the whole world, then Goat vs. Fish will say that you're Goat vs. Fish's favorite. Wait a versus. Is a person a goat or a fish? Is a person a goat or a fish? Does anyone know if a person is a goat or a fish? Oh, Goat vs. Fish. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Oh, the leg of goat. Extend your leg, goat. Extend the leg of goat. Full extension, goat. For the Versmas card. For the Goat vs. Fishmas card. Robo-Hamo, it's Goat vs. Fishmas. It's Goat vs. Fishmas. Robbie Hamo, if that is your real versus. Merry Christmas, no, Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. It was written. And it was written. High quality versus Celebration Cryptid 51. You recognize a thing of Goat vs. Fish. Kaya is goat. Arya is goat. Serena is fish. A mighty versus of Goat vs. Fish. It's Serena versus Arya and Kaya. Who shall triumph? The goats or the fish? We tried to bring you a quality versus Cryptid 51. We tried to bring you a quality versus. Goat vs. Fish takes a lot of repetition. Celebration for goat. Goat vs. Fish does take a lot of repetition. In this versus, we are making repetition of putting the sticker of Goat vs. Fish on these false GoatVsFishmas cards. GoatVsFishmas. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. And that's the versus, Goat and Fish. That's the versus. But look at this, Goat and Fish. Look at this. this shiny versus. Look at this versus of GoatVsFish. Ooh! Look at the shiny versus of GoatVsFish. Are you goat or are you fish? Oh, I'm just a letter. I'm just a letter. What letter could I be? I could be an F, I could be a G. I'm just a letter. A letter. A letter B. A letter B. Let it be. Oh, let it be. Oh, open up inside me, let her be. Goat and fish, we now have 20 GoatVsFishmas. 20 GoatVsFishmas. 20 GoatVsFishmas. Ready for verses, ready for verses. But there's still much preparation to be done. Getting excited for Versmas? Yes. And in the Versmas mailings, among other verses, you will definitely be getting the new decal of GoatVsFish. You're definitely getting this new decal of GoatVsFish. Why, it's the album cover for Do You Be Goat or Fish. It's the album cover for Do You Be Goat or Fish in decal form, and it does say GoatVsFish. Look at those rounded edges. Oh, my verses. Rounded interior printings. Oh, GoatVsFish. Cute GoatVsFish. Cute GoatVsFish. So we're just going to put GoatVsFish. Oh, yeah. Put it in me. Put it in me, yeah. Just put in GoatVsFish. We put in GoatVsFish, and we think that for the Versmas celebration, how about a sparkly GoatVsFish? Ooh, how about a sparkly GoatVsFish? Such a festive verses, it's such a festive verses. Such a festive verses. And how about a unification of goatfish, a unification, the unity of goatfish, because goat and fish come together around GoatVsFishmas. Put that in the verses. And how about GoatVsFish, delivering the presence of mind to choose goat or fish all around the world on GoatVsFishmas. Art by Fulsham Art. And of course, there will also be a merry GoatVsFishmas card in every verses. Oh, it will be a celebration. Oh, it will be a celebration. I'm full of GoatVsFish, I'm full of GoatVsFish, yeah! Have yourself a merry goat versus fish. Everywhere you verse. We'll pack up the rest of the verses at a future verses. For now, it's time to keep putting on the decals of GoatVsFishmas. If you would like to get on the Goat vs. Fish, Merry GoatVsFishmas mailing list, join the Patreon of Goat vs. Fish at patreon.com/GoatVsFish for $5 verse American dollars a month, beginning now, to receive the gift of Goat vs. Fish. Get yourself on the Goat vs. Fish mailing list. Get yourself on the Goat vs. Fish mailing list. It's the most wonderful verse of goat and fish. More cards. It's nice how they each look handwritten and special, even though they were just mass-produced in a factory somewhere, probably overseas by slave labor. I don't know. I can't say that for sure. Maybe we should look at maybe we should actually look into that before I start making any outrageous claims that could leave me liable for slander. Maybe you should, Stonks. Maybe you should. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Mad in China. Never heard of that place. Enjoy the low price of Merry Christmas cards while you can. Soon we may be enjoying a rich diet of tariffs that will make your holiday cheer cost as much as 10 or 20 or even 25% more. That's enough donkey versus elephant. Donkey versus elephant is a false versus. There's only goat versus fish. No, friggin' hear this guy out. I think I friggin' want to hear that. You know, I've actually been getting into politics myself a lot recently, you know. I used to friggin' avoid it, but, you know, between you and me, I've always friggin' been there. I've been there just waiting for my friggin' time to friggin' strike, you know. But, actually just friggin' turn the other friggin' cheek. Hey, Trav Cam, I'm in the middle of a friggin' sermon over here. Trav Cam, could you please just enter the friggin' church and friggin' sit down in the friggin' pews, please. I'm trying to have a friggin' sermon over here. I'm trying to have a friggin' sermon. Hey, what are the friggin' 12? Oh, it's my friggin' 12 apostles. Well, that's pretty friggin' great. Hey, there's friggin' 12 of you. That's friggin' great. You know? So sit down and shut up and listen to my friggin' holy word. I was just friggin' saying how I've been thinking about getting into friggin' politics lately. Hey, Cryptid51, it's my friggin' birthday coming up. I'll be as friggin' fantacular as I friggin' want. It's my party and I'll friggin' say what I want to. I'll do it. But I ain't gonna friggin' cry. Crying is for friggin' sissies. And I'm not one of those. No, I friggin' turn the other cheek. And and I say, give me more. And then I friggin' turn over your cheeks and I friggin' clap those cheeks, you know what I'm friggin' saying? I ain't above it. You know, I'll friggin' pardon my friggin' self, you know? Or maybe I'll get my dad to pardon me. Maybe that's the friggin' idea. Maybe I just get my dad to forgive me for whatever I friggin' did. I heard that that's friggin' popular these friggin' days. Travcam 0 with the radiation of Goat vs. Fish. Celebration for the radiation of Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fishmas. Of course, Goat vs. Fishmas is coming up. You may say, oh, that's not for a long versus, but we must start making preparations even now for Goat vs. Fishmas. And if you will look at these old Christmas cards, you see, it was always Goat vs. Fishmas, but then Jesus Christ took the celebration of Goat vs. Fishmas and just crossed out Goat vs. Fish and put Christ over Goat vs. Fish. So now we have to reclaim Goat vs. Fishmas. We need to put the Goat vs. Fish back in Christmas, back in Goat vs. Fishmas. It's the war on Fencemas. It's the war on Goat vs. Fishmas. There's a war on Goat vs. Fishmas. There's a war on Goat vs. Fishmas being conducted by fence sitters. And we need you all to keep the verses of Goat vs. Fishmas strong in your hearts unless the fence sitters come and destroy Goat vs. Fishmas. They're trying to destroy, they're making fancy conflict on Goat vs. Fishmas. It's a war on Goat vs. Fishmas. And it's a war that we cannot allow them to win, and it cannot even begin because it's a false versus. Who's with Goat vs. Fish? Who's with Goat vs. Fish? I will defend Goat vs. Fishmas. We want to hear you crying out in the chat. I will defend Goat vs. Fishmas. Who out there will defend Goat vs. Fishmas? Who can we count on to defend Goat vs. Fishmas? From the fence sitters? Travcam 0 appreciation for the radiation. They will try to stop you. They will try to stop you from saying Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. When someone says to you, when you are consuming, when you are out there making consumption, celebration, wow, mom, and they say to you, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Do you know what you say? You say Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. You say Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. You say Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Let's try a versus. It goes like this. It would go, let's do a hypothetical versus with the goat and stonks. Goat, let us suppose that you are purchasing some fence nog for inebriation. And you're at Trader Stonks, and you're going to buy 18 cartons of fence nog for your celebration, and Stonks is at Trader Stonks, and you're going to make the purchase. And Goat vs. Fish.
I would like to purchase 18 bottles of fence nog. I plan to get drunk and entertain my guests.
Okay, that's going to be $69.69.
I will take my membership discount.
Oh, yes. And with your discount, it's going to be $66.60.
Accept a credit card.
What do you think this is? The 1800s? Of course we accept credit card. Get over here. Okay, just sign here and then, yeah, just confirm there. It appears that your card has been declined.
I just used it yesterday.
And now it says here that there's been an error processing. Let's, you could try swiping it again.
Okay, let's try.
Okay, you can skip this part of the verses. Just get to the part. You can skip this part. This is grossly overwritten. Oh my verses! Whoever made this written, Doof Supreme. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Who made this? This verse is far too long. Just cut to the end of the verses. Thank you for your purchase. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas.
Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Do you do?
Goat vs. Fishmas? What's that? And Goat vs. Fish. And Goat vs. Fish. And then they ask you, what is Goat vs. Fish? And what do you say when they ask, what is Goat vs. Fish? Who knows the verses? Put it in chat now. When they say, what's Goat vs. Fishmas? What's Goat vs. Fishmas? What do you say? What do you say? Thunderhead81, welcome to Goat vs. Fishmas. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. When someone says to you, what is Goat vs. Fishmas? You say, are you goat or fish? What is Goat vs. Fish? You say, are you goat or fish? If you do not know what to say, you can always say, are you goat or fish? This is how we spread the verses of Goat vs. Fish. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Are you goat, are you fish, are you goat or fish? Goat vs. Fish needs your help once again to reverse the verses. Appreciation. Appreciation. Merry Goat vs. Fishmas. Now there is no black or white, only goat and fish, but Goat vs. Fish has seen what they are calling Black Friday sales. Black Friday sales, Goat and Fish. but it is very fence. Because GoatVsFish has been gandering. GoatVsFish has been gandering at a magnetic freestanding chalkboard for GoatVsFish. And they say, oh, up to 80% off GoatVsFish. Fence Fridays and GoatVsFish. We go to look at the verses and there is no discount for GoatVsFish. There is no discount on the freestanding chalkboard for GoatVsFish. What the fence? Get into the GoatVsFishmas verses. Get into the GoatVsFishmas verses. For the love of GoatVsFish. GoatVsFish, is this such a serious versus? Well, it has been over an hour of putting GoatVsFish on the Merry FenceMass cards. But it is this timing, Goat and Fish, this timing that we spend in celebration of GoatVsFishmas. That's part of what makes it such a beautiful versus. Is that not what makes it such a beautiful versus? In this fence-topian nightmare, you may have one saying to you, is it even worth the time? Is it worth it to buy? Is it worth it to buy and spend the time to mail out a postcard? In this day and age, just send an email, just send a text. Who needs to spend all the time thinking about all of their loved ones and friends who they haven't communicated with throughout the year because you've always been putting it off until some other time when it might be more convenient? Who has time to mail them a letter and actually find out where they live and what their address is? I mean, that doesn't sound like a very efficient use of your capital or your time. You could be spending that time going to work or watching a YouTube video that's not about GoatVsFish or just sitting around scratching your butt. You could be doing any of these things that are just the utility of any one of those things would be so much more than buying a card to send to someone that you care about or maybe haven't thought about in a while. I mean, please, this mass-produced junk. Who wants to spend the time to do that? Our communities are doing just fine. Our communities aren't frayed at the edges and falling apart everywhere. We don't need to be sending mail to one another. The Postal Service is on its last legs. We've outgrown the need for... It's so tawdry. It's so physical, you know? I mean, we're here. We just watch a stream. You don't need to actually touch a person or be around their pheromones or... Just subscribe to their OnlyFans. You don't just go on Facebook and leave a comment and say, hey, happy birthday. That's all we need. That's all you need to maintain your communities. You can just spend the rest of your time working and consuming advertisements and a media that contains product placement advertisements, which you don't need to mail a card to anyone that you know or love. It's so old-fashioned. Our communities are fine. You don't need to waste your time doing this. I tried to tell it to GoatVsFish, but GoatVsFish wouldn't listen. All of your subs and all of your bits and all of your gifts are being spent on these cards. I mean, I don't know. I feel like maybe just invest in some stonks or some fat Pepe coin or something. I don't know about all this. I don't know about all this sentiment. It seems like a waste of money to me. GoatVsFish has an OnlyFins? Not yet, but maybe GoatVsFish will in some verses. Maybe there will be an OnlyFins for GoatVsFish. Maybe if GoatVsFish reaches 100 patrons on the Patreon of GoatVsFish, then we will start an OnlyFans. How about that, Robbo Hamo? If GoatVsFish gets 100 $5 patrons on the Patreon of GoatVsFish, we will start a GoatVsFish OnlyFans. How's that for a versus? Merry GoatVsFishmas. Merry GoatVsFishmas. And look at all these verses. Look at the shadow of GoatVsFish. These were all GoatVsFish once upon a verses. We need more GoatVsFish. But that's the verses, Goat and Fish. That is the verses. That is the verses, Goat and Fish. The community of GoatVsFish. The congregation of GoatVsFish. We must embolden the congregation of GoatVsFish. And that means you. That means you. We must embolden the congregation of GoatVsFish. And that is why we are building a temple to GoatVsFish. Yes, many of you came to know GoatVsFish during the great fence-demic, the great separation of goat and fish. But it's long verses that the goat and fish came together in celebration of GoatVsFish. And that is why we will creation a congregation of GoatVsFish. That is why we shall creation the congregation of GoatVsFish, and it will be a mighty verses. And the goat and fish will join GoatVsFish in the congregation of GoatVsFish. It will be a celebration. It will be a celebration of GoatVsFish. A celebration of GoatVsFish. A celebration of GoatVsFish. A celebration of GoatVsFish. Where are the decals of GoatVsFish? Have we exhausted all of the 3D decals of GoatVsFish? Is that all of the verses? Are we out of GoatVsFish 3D decals of GoatVsFish? Have we versus them all? Have we versus them all in the serverses of GoatVsFish? Have we versus them all in the services of GoatVsFish? I suspect there might be more verses in another place, in another space. I suspect there might be some more verses in another place or space. But maybe we will save that for a future verses. Maybe we'll save that for a future verses. But we need at least plenty more. But there's still verses to be done. There's still verses to be done. Hi, Zane Aston. Merry GoatVsFishmas to you. Merry GoatVsFishmas. Scott from Canada, welcome to GoatVsFish. So we have here 30. Goat and fish, 30. 30 verses. 30 verses of Goat versus Fish. Hey, you didn't ask. We were waiting for you to ask, Scott from Canada. We were testing you, Scott from Canada, to see if you would ask. We were testing the congregation. Testing the congregation, and you failed, Goat versus Fish. Zane Aston, are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or fish? Are you goat or fish? Goat versus fish. Oh, we found some bonus verses. We found some bonus verses. Fishmas, Goat versus Fishmas. Goat versus Fishmas. Oh, baby, I saw a goat kissing fish again. Underneath the fence'll tool. Though it's been said many times, many ways, Goat versus Fishmas. Goat versus Fishmas. Goat versus Fishmas. Goat versus Fishmas. Merry Goat versus Fishmas. Merry Goat versus Fishmas. So we have a few more verses of Versmas left. Truly, we have 10 Merry Versmases to verses. But we only have 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5 Goat versus Fish. Now, there may be more Goat versus Fish at another verses. But let's do as much Merry Goat versus Fishmas. Goat versus Fishmas. Tricky goat versus fish. Tricky goat versus fish. Merry goat versus Fishmas. And one more goat versus fish. One more goat versus fish. And my powers friggin' outlast you. You don't have enough friggin' goat versus fish to overtake my friggin' Christmas. You see, you got friggin' 5 more there, and you don't have enough friggin' goat versus fish. Wow, it's a friggin' Christmas miracle. Christmas friggin' survives another friggin' day. Another friggin' birthday for me. There will be plenty of goat versus fish. We will make goat versus fish of all the Christmas. You just watch goat versus fish. We will not let your taunts delay goat versus fish. What am I watching? You are watching Goat versus Fishmas. Merry Goat versus Fishmas from Goat versus Fish, the goat fish. Are you goat or are you fish? Arbalara, are you goat or are you fish? Arbalara, you are just too used to watching so much on YouTube. You are scrolling about and you see the same verses over and over again, don't you? You just see the same verses over and over and over again, don't you? You see a clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about the universe with someone, and then you see someone's they're dancing and they're saying, "You put my hand up on my fish. When you fish, we fish, we fish." And then you see a crude animation of a goat talking to a fish, and the fish is saying, "If you were in a room full of 100 other fish, what would you do?" And then the goat says, "Well, why am I in the room with 100 other fish?" And the fish says, "Well, why are you in the room with the other fish?" And the goat says, "Well, I don't know. You told me I was in the room with the other fish." And then the fish says, well, now that you mentioned it, I don't know why you're in the room with the other fish." And you get so used to seeing this type of contentment over and over and over again that you forget what it is to feel something new, to feel something true. Two goats, one fish. Now that's a classic verses. You forget what it is to see something true, something new, something that speaks directly to you and asks, "Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish?" We're just preparing the Merry Goat versus Fishmas cards for Goat versus Fishmas. You see, your mind is engaged. You are thinking of things to say to Goat versus Fish. You want to best Goat versus Fish. You want to overcome Goat versus Fish. Yes. Yes, feel the power of Goat versus Fish. Or you could just swipe away and go back to watching everything that you've already seen 1 million verses before, and then you can just swipe away and then watch that again, and Then you can just feel the emptiness hollowing out inside you as you realize that everything is just here to sell you stonks. Or you could stay around with GoatVsFish. Or you could stay around with GoatVsFish. Enjoy the one true verses. Join the congregation of GoatVsFish. Join the community of goat and fish. Who is honored to receive such cards? Well, there are some who are indeed so very special to GoatVsFish. And then there are the $5 patrons to GoatVsFish. If you join the GoatVsFish Patreon for $5 American dollars a month, you will receive a personalized Merry GoatVsFishmas card from GoatVsFish. What do you say to this? Don't you want to join GoatVsFish? $5 American dollars a month on the patronage of GoatVsFish? GoatVsFishmas. The doxing of GoatVsFish. The doxing of GoatVsFish. Have you ever wanted to mail something to GoatVsFish? Appreciation, wow, mom. Appreciation to our mods here on GoatVsFish. Have you ever wanted to mail something to GoatVsFish? Well, now you can. You can with the address of GoatVsFish. Ooh, look. It's the public address of GoatVsFish. Havoc Black, welcome to GoatVsFish. Do you wish to receive a Merry Versmas card from GoatVsFish? Become a $5 patron of GoatVsFish. You spend a lot of verses. You spend a lot of verses every month, don't you? Many purchases. But why not support GoatVsFish, the one true verses? For the price of 1 cup of caffeination a month, you can support GoatVsFish. Maybe we'll make a Substack for GoatVsFish. We've heard of this Substack. Everyone is versing around on Substack in recent verses. Do we need Substack instead of Patreon for GoatVsFish? Join the Patreon of GoatVsFish. Scott from Canada. It seems that R. Balara has gone back to scrolling the YouTubes in the everlasting fenciness. Más pescado, celebración por pescado, feliz cabra contra pez dad. Feliz cabra contra pez dad. Más pescado. Pescado! Pescado! Goat versus fish. 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 Well, this has been an exciting versus of Goat versus Fish. As we prepare preparation the merry Goat versus Fishmas to send to the loving patrons of Goat versus Fish and those who are oh so special to Goat versus Fish. We appreciate your spending your verses here of Versmas with Goat versus Fish. And we shall see you on the very next celebration of Goat versus Fish. Beautiful verses, Goat and Fish. Have a beautiful verses. Merry Goat versus Fishmas to all. Merry Goat versus Fishmas to all. Celebration. Celebration. Merry Goat versus Fishmas. Merry Goat versus Fishmas. We shall see you next verses, Mom. We shall see you next verses. Work in 1984. And all those who have joined Goat versus Fish on this auspicious verses. Celebration.